So our group is going to be doing role play two, scenario 7, which is we know what's best. For this case, Dr. Morgan is going to be the school-based BCBA, and that's going to be played by myself, Stephanie. Mrs. Lee is the general education teacher, and that's going to be played by Mendy. And Ms. Alvarez is the ESE specialist, which is going to be played by Aubrey. So in our case study, for some background, Jordan is a fourth grade general education student who engages in yelling, throwing materials, task refusal, aggression, and leaving the classroom area. The behaviors occur during academic transitions, tasks, group instruction, and unstructured activities. Some of the members believe that the behaviors are maintained by escape and attention. They want to complete a brief functional assessment checklist and use the results to recommend a more restrictive educational setting. The school-based BCBA is concerned that Jordan's behavior may have multiple functions and that the team's assumptions may influence the assessment process.
Thank you both for meeting today. We need to discuss Jordan's behavior and the team's request for an expedited functional behavior assessment. Miss Lee, can you briefly explain what has been happening?
Jordan's behavior has become much more serious. He yells, throws materials, refuses assignments, and frequently leaves the classroom. There have also been a few incidents of aggression. He is missing instruction, and the behavior is affecting the safety and learning of the other students.
When do you notice the behavior occurring most often?
Well, it usually happens when Jordan is given difficult work, asked to transition, or told that he cannot have something that he wants. He refuses or leaves the room, the assignment is delayed, and an adult usually has to follow him. That is why the team believes the behavior is maintained by escape and attention.
The staff are asking us to complete the functional assessment checklist as quickly as possible. They believe Jordan may need a more appropriate educational setting, and they want the FBA completed so the team can make that decision.
I understand the urgency, and I agree that Jordan needs immediate support. However, I have concerns about relying primarily on checklists or using the FBA to support a placement decision that may have already been made.
Well, what concerns you about the checklist? The behavior patterns seem fairly clear.
Your observations are valuable, but they represent hypotheses rather than confirmed behavioral functions. Checklists and interviews are indirect assessment methods. They can help us identify possible functions, but they should not be the only information that we use.
Do you believe the team may be incorrect about escape and attention?
Escape and attention may both be involved, but Jordan's behaviors may not serve the same function. For example, he may leave the classroom to escape difficult work, but throw materials to obtain attention. The same behavior could also serve different functions in different situations. That's why I believe the behavior may be controlled by multiple functions.
I understand, but we cannot wait several weeks before doing something. The current situation is becoming unmanageable.
I agree, and I'm not suggesting that we delay the process. Under BACB Ethics Code 2.02 timeliness, I have the responsibility to complete professional responsibilities promptly. However, moving quickly does not mean that we skip important assessment steps.
What would an expedited but appropriate FBA involve?
First, we need to define each behavior in observable and measurable terms. Instead of using broad labels such as disruptive behaviors, we should separately define those behaviors such as yelling, throwing materials, aggression, task refusal, and leaving the classroom.
And why is it important to separate the behaviors?
Because they may have different functions. If we combine all of them into one category, we may overlook the important patterns. Code 2.13, Selecting, Designing, and Implementing Assessments, requires me to select evidence-based assessment procedures that are appropriate for Jordan's individual needs.
What information should we gather after the behaviors are defined?
We should review existing information, including Jordan's academic performance, attendance, discipline records, previous interventions, and any patterns involving activities, staff member settings, or times of day.
And can we still use the functional assessment checklist?
Yes, we can use them as one part of the assessment. However, we should use the results to develop hypothesis, not to confirm the function by themselves. We also need input from Jordan's family, teachers, and other staff members.
That connects to involving stakeholders, correct?
Yes, Code 2.09 involving client stakeholders requires relevant stakeholders to be included throughout the assessment and intervention process. Jordan's family may be able to provide information about behavior patterns, communication skills, health concerns, preferences, and strategies that may work outside of school.
And what type of direct observations would you conduct?
I would observe Jordan during difficult academic tasks, preferred activities, transitions, group instruction, and unstructured periods. We can collect ABC data to document what happens before and after the behavior. And we should also measure frequency, duration, latency, and task completion when appropriate.
I can begin collecting ABC data. I do worry that my frustration may affect how I describe what happens.
I appreciate your honesty. That is another concern I wanted to address. In Code 1.10, Awareness of Personal Bias and Challenges, this requires behavior analysts to recognize biases that could affect personal judgment. So this principle is also useful for our entire team.
I think some staff members may already be looking for information that supports moving Jordan to another setting.
That is possible. Once a team assumes the behavior is maintained by escape, members may focus on incidents during academic tasks and overlook behaviors related to attention, preferred items, sensory variables, and other conditions.
So we need to collect information without trying to prove what we already believe.
Exactly. The purpose of the FBA is to understand the variables influencing Jordan's behavior and identify effective supports. It should not be used only to justify a predetermined placement.
I agree. Placement should not be decided until the team reviews the assessment findings and determines whether Jordan can be supported in his current setting.
Correct. Under Code 3.01, responsibility to clients, my responsibility is to act in Jordan's best interest, protect his rights, maximize potential benefits, and avoid any harm. A rushed or a biased assessment could lead to ineffective interventions or an inappropriate educational setting recommendation.
What can we do immediately while the FBA is being completed?
We can begin interim supports. We can provide Jordan with a visual schedule, clear expectations, choices between tasks, shorter assignments, planned breaks, and frequent reinforcement for appropriate participation.
Could we also teach him to ask for help or request a break instead of leaving the classroom?
Yes, we can teach and reinforce appropriate requests for help, attention, or a break. We will collect data on how Jordan responds to these supports. However, we should avoid presenting the interim strategies as a complete behavior intervention plan before the FBA is finished.
Because the final intervention should be based on the assessment results.
Exactly. Code 2.14, selecting, designing, and implementing behavior change interventions, requires interventions to be based on assessment results. And Code 2.17, collecting and using data, also requires us to use appropriate collected data when making decisions about services.
I can implement the interim strategies and collect the classroom data. I will document what happens without labeling the function.
I will gather Jordan's records, contact his family, and coordinate observation times. I will also explain to the team that the FBA is intended to identify effective support rather than confirm a placement decision.
I will create the operational definitions, provide the data sheets, and train staff on interim procedures. After the record review, interviews, and direct observations are completed, I will summarize the findings, possible functions, limitations, and recommendations in writing.
Can we set a clear timeline so the team knows what the assessment that the assessment is being prioritized?
Yes, we can establish deadlines for interviews, observations, record review, and follow-up meetings. This will allow us to respond promptly without compromising the quality of the assessment.
That sounds reasonable. My priority is keeping Jordan and the other students safe while helping him participate successfully in the classroom.
Then our plan is to expedite the FBA, begin interim supports, collect direct and indirect data, involve Jordan's family, and wait for the findings before recommending a placement change.
Correct. This approach addresses the team's immediate concerns while protecting Jordan's right to an individualized, objective, and evidence-based assessment. It also supports Code 3.12, advocating for appropriate services, because we are advocating for the level of assessment and behavioral support Jordan needs. Thank you both for working collaboratively by moving quickly while still collecting objective data, involving Jordan's family, and avoiding assumptions. We can make decisions that are ethical, evidence-based, and in Jordan's best interest with the information we collect. Thank you.